The SHAIVITE symbol. At your professional training in Austin, Texas, I personally experienced high professional training in Austin, Texas, I personally experienced high definition regressions that altered my life for the better. I also had an unplanned shared consciousness event with a complete stranger. That event is etched in my mind forever. The stranger I have mentioned was another man who was attending your training at the same time I was. My wife and I had sat at mealtimes beside this very fine fellow, who was a psychiatrist from Canada. His story is my story. As this man and I talked at supper one night, he was somewhat saddened by the fact that he was having no regressions, while I had related mine to him and had expressed to him that I was in disbelief, if not shock, from everything that I had encountered. I began to feel a strong empathy for him, and I found myself quite concerned that he find his way to an experience. Part of this was that I recognized that his ability to do so could have a great impact on his patients, as well as on himself. His situation stayed on my mind and in my heart. During a coffee break at one of the sessions, I stumbled across Brian and Carol out back of the building and tried to excuse myself. They would have none of it, and so I told them of the psychiatrist and the good that I thought he could do should he have a regression. The next day, Brian called him up for a demonstration in front of the class, and he had a marvelous and detailed regression during which he was being trained by a holy man in ancient India, many centuries ago, in order to assume his place as a provincial ruler. He went on to have a coronation ceremony. The detail was remarkable. I was so happy that Brian had undertaken the regression for the psychiatrist, and I sat through the majority of it with my eyes shut, grateful to the extent that I guess you could call it relief. While my eyes were shut, I had the sudden picture in my head of some oddly shaped symbol, which looked like a bug. It was quite distinct and clear, but I had no idea what it was or why it would appear during this fellow's regression. That evening, my wife and I sat with the psychiatrist at supper. I told him how glad I was for him, and he told me how he was undergoing the transitional type of thinking that I had had earlier in the week upon first experiencing a past life. As we discussed his regression, I mentioned the weird symbol that I had seen while he had been hypnotized. He asked me what it was. I told him that I had no clue but could draw it for him. I took a napkin and drew it, and he got a look on his face that I cannot describe. Somewhat astonished and serious at the same time, he stated, "That is the symbol that was on the flags at my coronation." He did not know what it was, nor did I by this time in the week. I had resigned myself to being freaked out about my this time in the week. I had resigned myself to being freaked out about my experience of being regressed. But this was too much now. I was experiencing shared consciousness with a total stranger. I spent the next several years trying to find out what the symbol meant. I wrote to universities in India. I called people, never telling them the truth but simply saying, I saw this somewhere and was trying to figure out what it was. No one had any clue. My wife and I went on an Alaskan cruise and, prior to going, I signed us up for a Reiki class in Seattle. Bear in mind, before attending your past life regression seminar I thought that such people were nuts. Odd how experience can humble and enlighten. As we left the Reiki class, we asked the instructor if she knew where any coffee shops were in Seattle, and she said that the one she was familiar with was kind of different, as it served Indian food and was in a unique part of town. We got directions and went. I asked several people there if they had ever seen the symbol before as I drew pictures of it for them. They had not. As we prepared to leave, we went over to the old bookstore part of the shop, and when I checked out, the fellow at the counter said, "Did you find everything you need?" I replied, "Everything except the one thing I was looking for." He inquired what it was, stating that he was well versed in India's history, and asked me to draw it for him. And so I did. He knew immediately what it was, a small sect's portrayal of a Shaivat symbol. It had only been drawn by a limited number of people. 5 years after seeing the symbol in a stranger's regression, I was finally led to another stranger who could explain it. Raymond Wilson. Raymond's fascinating story reveals how his empathic connection to the Canadian psychiatrist opened his own intuitive capacities. With his eyes gently closed during the other's regression, he rather suddenly saw the oddly shaped Shaivat symbol. The psychiatrist validated Raymond's vision at dinner that evening. 5 years later, Raymond received a second validation at the old bookstore in Seattle. After reading this account, I remembered that after returning home from the Texas workshop, I had dictated some of my own recollections of that week's experiences. I quickly found my notes about Nikhil, the psychiatrist. Nikhil's first past life memory was from about 2500 years ago in ancient India. Nikhil was a 6-year-old boy surrounded by other children, one of whom was his best friend. He could see the guru of the place where he lived. This guru wore no shirt but a string of sandalwood beads, which Nikhil could smell. His senses had become heightened during the regression. The guru taught the boys lessons, and later Nikhil collected firewood and performed other chores. Sitting around the fire, holding hands in a circle, he heard and was able to repeat to the entire workshop group the guru's teachings about humility, simplicity, giving, compassion, and kindness. Nikhil had a second past life memory in India, in which he was the prince of a small kingdom. In that life, his best friend had sacrificed his life in a battle in order to save the life of Nikhil. In his current life, this friend is his sister-in-law. This memory helped to explain much of their relationship, the immediate connection and the sense of safety, security, and deep friendship. Raymond's journey of validation took 5 years until the Shaivat symbol was identified. Nikhil's transformation was immediate, especially as he remembered and incorporated the 2500-year-old wisdom. These teachings are age-old, yet they could not be more relevant today. They are the lessons of the masters shared with us through Catherine, and they are the lessons of all great spiritual traditions. We are to be humble, kind, generous, and compassionate. We are spiritual beings, and this is how spiritual beings feel and act. This is timeless wisdom, and this is how we can save the world. Raymond could see into Nikhil's past life and envisioned the symbol displayed on his coronation flags. While watching a female workshop participant undergo a regression, Eileen, who tells her story next, opened her own intuitive eyes to find the face of an ancient male monk looking back at her. Past life regressions are quite literally transformative. Eileen accomplished this feat spontaneously, but in my book Through Time into Healing I describe an exercise called Faces that can enable you to experience it for yourself. Sit a few feet across from a friend, with the lights dim and with soft music in the background. Look into the other person's face. Watch to see if the person's face changes. Observe and describe the changes you see. Features often do appear to change. Eyes, noses, and hairstyles dissolve and reform. Headgear sometimes appears. You can also try this exercise alone, by using a mirror and observing the changes you see in your own face. The only secret to faces is to make sure you try it in a dimly lit room. This frees up the left brain and allows easier passage of intuitive impressions. Faces can provide clues to many different past lives. As in other methods, meditation, visualization, and a free association to the observed changes can fill out the memory. Let them expand and develop, without censoring the material. A face may become a group of faces, or a whole scene may unfold behind the face. You may hear a voice or an important word. Try it and see. Soulmate. This is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.